And I will call the regular council meeting for Monday, November 9th to order. And I wanted to start off with my mask on just to make a point. For those of you watching, we did have a recent change in our COVID status, and I'll have our CAO touch on that before we begin with our regular agenda.
So the city of Macomb, as of 4 o'clock today, was elevated to an enhanced status for COVID with a total of 19 active cases within the city. This would represent by far the highest number of cases, active cases we've had in the city since the beginning of the pandemic. And as such, additional recommendations from the province for restrictions are in place. Those restrictions are a maximum of 15 attendees to either indoor or outdoor social events or gatherings, and the use of masks whenever work is occurring, or in workplaces, whenever there is congregation in common spaces, or workers are not able to isolate within an individual workspace such as an office or cubicle. So that is the situation we find ourselves in here this evening. And so staff will be wearing the masks this evening for the duration of the meeting, except when they're working, of course, to make sure we're
Thank you, Chief Gotti. We appreciate that. I think that it's important for in our community to appreciate the fact that our province is especially concerned with the smaller family gathering type meetings, because that appears to be a source of transmission that is been brought to light here in the last while, especially highlighted lately. So let's have everyone in our community do your part and pay attention to your proper physical distancing and groups, especially in your homes and whatnot, when I would suggest that the rules tend to be a little more relaxed. That would be the polite way to put it. Councillor Gullickson.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. And just a point of clarification then, for our Remembrance Day ceremony on Wednesday, is it going to be limited to 15 people then, even though it's outside? Is that correct?
So the city has been in touch with Legion officials, and I believe that that is an outdoor event, so they will be limited to 200 participants. However, it is being located close to the LMC, where I think there's an expectation that washroom facilities and whatnot will be available. And I mean, we are limited to 15 individuals in there at once. It's a difficult thing to manage with mask use and all the rest. So I guess I would caution people just of showing up as much. It is certainly a traditional thing and a respectful thing to be at that event. Unless you were specifically invited, I would suggest that it might be more appropriate to pay your respects in other ways than attending in person. Councillor Hibbs.
No, thank you, Mayor Creasy. Do you know if it's going to be live streamed by any chance, the event that's at the LMC?
I will defer to Chief Gotti.
Not that we're aware. We have talked to the organizers. They haven't advised us of any live stream capabilities and haven't requested support of the same this time.
Councillor Gullickson.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. A further question then is it going to affect the arena as far as hockey and those events? Or
So spectator sports, seated events such as that are not subject to the 15-person limit. That's not to say that we don't have some restrictions in place. I unfortunately don't know them off the top of my head, but we are in touch with the minor sports who are hosting those games to make sure they're well aware of the restrictions that are in place.
Thank you.
Very good. So thanks for your indulgence with straying from our agenda here. You do have it before you. Councillor Gullickson.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I'll move the agenda as presented.
Thank you very much. Anyone before we vote? All those in favor? Thank you. So we do have a public hearing this evening in another 20 minutes, 25 minutes or so. So I think that to go through the capital, we'll just continue right on with request for decision.
You certainly could, but if you are concerned about time, you could start with one of the items between 5.5 and 5.8, which I expect will be slightly shorter.
Okay. Director Thompson, are you prepared to move ahead with the rezoning request for 400.31?
Yeah, I certainly am.
Please proceed.
So following the applicant's request for this particular property to rezone from R1 to R4, and following council's passage of first reading of that same request, the applicant has advised us that they wish to withdraw their application. And so they've submitted that in writing. And so we are requesting council rescind their motion setting the public hearing in order to stop that from happening. Essentially, when it came forward, the council's direction to set the public hearing, now the process was put in motion, and it's council's process to see through or to stop. And so we are asking for council to actually do two things: rescind their motion regarding the public hearing, and to defeat second reading, and that will end the process for this particular rezone.
Very good, and that fulfills our obligations according to the MGA then?
It certainly does, and we have already sent out letters to the affected parties who were notified of the rezone of the public hearing, that the applicant has withdrawn their application.
Very good. Would anybody care to, Councillor Connick?
So I would move that council rescind its October 23rd motion 20/353 to schedule a public hearing for bylaw 400.31 at 5:30 PM on Monday, November 23rd, 2020, and notify affected parties.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions, or we choose to speak against this motion? Seeing none, then I will call the question. All those in favor? That was unanimous. Thank you. And Councillor Connick?
And I would so move that council give bylaw 400.31 second reading.
Thank you very much. Any questions here, concerns? And then we'll call the question, and all those in favor? Opposed? That is defeated. Thank you. And noted. So that does conclude that item then, Director Thompson. Thank you. You're on a roll here, so you might as well continue on with item 5.6, the garbage truck replacement purchase.
As part of the 2019 20 capital budget, administration is seeking council's authorization to purchase a replacement garbage truck for a cost of $351,104. This purchase price exceeds the budget for this truck by approximately $17,000. The delivery of these units is quite long. They are built to suit, and so we expect the new unit to take 40 weeks or about 10 months to arrive, if approved tonight. So the old unit, the current unit that, so the unit this is replacing will be moved down into a spare unit, and the current spare will be sold at auction. We've looked at different types of bin styles because we received one bid for this project, and we looked at different bin styles or truck styles in order to one, ensure that we are receiving fair value, and two, to see what can work with our system. And given the fact that we have we have lane garbage bins, the 3 cubic yard garbage bins, the side load trucks that we have are not as common in the garbage truck manufacturing world. And so there are a limited number of manufacturers that actually make those types of trucks. But when we compare the cost of a front load truck to those units, especially when it comes to a front load truck that also would pick up that can also pick up the roll-out bins, A front load truck requires additional equipment to also pick up those roll-out bins, which puts the cost of that total unit north of $400,000 based on some quotes that we received in 2019. And so we think that the side load unit is still a big value for the city of Lacombe, and that the bid price that we received for this unit is fair market value. And so we are asking council's authorization to proceed with that purchase.
Thank you. So to be clear, the proposed unit that you're in the process of purchasing is only a side unit for the smaller bins. It will not do the front load. Is that what I glean from that?
It will be able to pick up the lane alley bins. So the ones we see in our garbage lanes, the 3 cubic yard bins, and as well as the front load, or as well as the roll-out bins for the black roll-out bins as well. That side load mechanism can pick up, essentially can pick up both. The ones that we're specing can pick up both. Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So just not the front for the 3 yard that some other outfits choose to use.
Correct.
Okay. And this was a pending purchase. Is it just the overage here that we need to consider at this point then, or? Chief Cuddy?
Actually, your purchasing policy as it stands today requires purchases over $75,000 to be brought to council, even when they're within budget or pre-approved. That is something we'd like to look at the next review of the purchasing policy, is that some of these routine purchases. This one would have to come because of the overage, as you've identified, but really had everything been as expected, it probably doesn't actually need council's review, but in this case it does.
Councilor Ross?
I was just gonna move the motion. It was the council authorizes the purchase of the Freightliner Labrie Sprinter garbage truck from Superior Truck Equipment for a cost of $351,104 plus GST.
Thank you. Anything additional on this item? Have a motion before us. All those in favor? Seeing none opposed, that's unanimous. For the record. And good timing on this item, Director Duke is with us. The stormwater pond policy.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Before council tonight is an updated and newly templated recreational use of stormwater ponds policy. The city first considered a policy to allow limited recreational use of certain city stormwater ponds in 2012, and a draft policy has been posted on the city website and utilized by staff since that time. However, inadvertently, the policy lacked a council resolution to adopt it, so it was not officially in effect, even though we've been using it and adhering to it for 8 years. Staff reviewed the existing policy to determine if any changes were needed. None were, except for the addition of 1 new stormwater pond to the list. Policy was clarified a little in the new format that you see here tonight. And overall, the policy has the following effects. It sets out a public notification plan to keep the public well informed as to the safest use of particular stormwater ponds. It sets up ice thickness measurement and inlet-outlet monitoring standards for staff to follow. And it limits the extent to which the public can use the ponds, primarily to avoid motorized equipment and vehicles on the ice in winter and immersive water activities in summer. So we're looking for a council adoption of policy or direction and how you'd like it amended tonight. Any questions?
Thank you, Director Duke. I think for the public watching, it's important to understand that just by council discussing this matter does not indicate that these areas are open for use yet. I've seen some individuals that are dangerously close, too far out on the ice already, having seen them around Crana and whatnot. So please do not get near the ice out there for a good long while yet until it's posted that it in fact is safe to do so. We don't need any tragedies in our community like this. So just a brief reminder. So I have someone to bring forward a motion. Councillor Ross?
Make the motion that council approves the recreational use of stormwater ponds policy 75/741.01 2020 PO as presented.
Thank you. Councillor Hibbs?
Just a couple of questions. So with this policy, it's really stating how the city will take care of these water bodies. For example, we do see members of the public go out and clear skating spaces, for example, on some of the water bodies that are listed as not for recreation use. So the city does not maintain, say, an ice surface there, but members of that neighborhood might. And so I just want to clarify that, like, this isn't talking about any penalties for people that do that. The understanding is that they're doing so at their own risk, and that the city isn't doing it on that surface for a reason. I guess it's not, I don't know if it's really explained properly with the policy, but is that a correct assessment?
Yes, that is a correct assessment. Director Duke, did you have something you wanted to add?
I'll just comment that I think primarily the reason why only 3 ponds are identified as available for use is simply a capacity issue. So city staff are busy clearing sidewalks and so on, pathways during winter, and to maintain the ice surfaces be testing ice thickness in multiple ponds is a little bit much for them, the existing staff to do. I'll also point out that at Crown Lake, not only are I believe 2 ice rinks are cleared and flooded, but also a lane skating area as well. So the recreational opportunities on Crown are quite high. I believe that's the reason why primarily.
Thanks for pointing that, Director Duke. They are quite high. However, I think that this kind of passive recreation is pretty important in our community. It is well used. I expect many of the other councillors are similar to myself in that I hear very little negative input on the use of these. The only thing that I would suggest that I have heard was perhaps a little better cleaning around the holiday season, which I know is problematic for staff, but that is also a time of the year when it is used extensively by neighboring residents. So if there's a way to perhaps enhance that a little bit, that would be appreciated, I'm sure. Councillor Goetson?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Does Mackenzie Ranch, do they clear it off down there, some citizens, the Mackenzie Ranch pond?
I believe that there are people down in Mackenzie Ranch Pond doing that, yeah.
So, because my thought process is that Mackenzie Ranch area has very little opportunity for recreation. Would be possible to add it to our list as far as clearing snow and making a skating rink there.
There is Iron Wolf.
So
Chief Cuddy?
that has not been contemplated in the operating budget that is before you this evening. It would be an incremental increase in the service level. So we can look at that, and certainly if that's something that council desires, we can look at the impact of that and whether it's something that can be worked in this season on a pilot basis, or whether we would have to look at that as a 2021, 2022 thing. We haven't considered that, I guess.
That's it, you're done? Okay. Councillor Hibbs?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I would point out that the, approved location areas are Crana Lake, Iron Wolf, and Royal Oak. So you do have an opportunity kind of in each of the areas of the community. Mackenzie to Iron Wolf is a bit of a walk, but then so is Royal Oak to a lot of the outlying area there too. So is it ideal? No. I wouldn't support changing the service level at this point in time. I don't know what the rest of council feels like, but I just do want to point that out, that there is something in sort of each area of town.
Anyone else? I believe we do have a motion before us for the policy implementation here. Do we not? Councillor Ross? Thank you. If there's nothing further, I will call the question. All those in favor? is unanimous as well. Thank you. 5, Director Juke. We've got a request from the Curling Club for a sound system upgrade. Care to take us through that item, please?
I would love to, thank you. So before council tonight is the request to expand the current scope of a 2020 capital project at the arena to include similar work in the curling complex. On October 21st, the city received a request from the Lacombe Curling Association for funding assistance to renovate the sound system in the curling complex. Clauses in the current lease between the city and the Curling Association provides for requests related to capital improvements like this, and it's basically on a negotiated basis. The association identified the sound system as essential to their 2020-2021 season so they can host modified events. With people spread throughout the complex, an effective PA system is going to be critical for them. The existing capital project in the arena was to install acoustic ceiling tiles and to update the electronics in Echo Energy Arena 1. The project completed during the late spring shutdown for COVID-19 and has an unused budget amount of $75,000. Administration proposes the city expand the scope of the sound project in Arena 1 to include work in the curling complex and to fund the work at 50% of the cost of expanded scope to a maximum of $15,000 for the city's share. On November 26th, Lacombe County Council will consider the city's application for a capital support grant for 26.56% of the expanded project scope if City Council approves it tonight. The county and the association will then be funding the remaining 50% of the cost if the county approves the request, and if not, the association will fund that 50% on their own. So just happy to take any questions if you have them.
Thanks, Director Juke. So just for some clarification, so the curling club has requested the city contribute to this in the main arena ice?
No, in the curling complex. So the Arena 1 project, the city did that in 2020. It was an approved capital project. But the Curling Association has brought forward that the curling complex itself has the same problem as the Arena 1 did.
It was just the way I read the motions. The council approves an amendment of the scope of the Arena 1 acoustic ceiling project. Okay,
Correct.
that
Yeah.
helps.
Yeah.
Something wasn't adding up there for me. Thanks for the clarification. Who'd care to start? Councillor Gullickson.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Yeah, one of the things that has come up with the sound system since they had to change their ceiling, and we had to do the major renovation for the arena, and I made them pull out their drop ceiling that was in there, change the acoustics. So their sound system was not nearly as effective out on the ice surface as it was previously. So I think that is one of the issues that has come to light. And I think the main part of the expense will be that area, the area out on the ice surface, which is an area that the city rents out or is rented out more in the summertime and so on. It can be utilized at that time as more of a city building and a curling complex or curling rink at that point. So I think that portion of it, it's kind of reasonable expectation to have that contribution from the city for that portion of the upgrade.
So to just have administration speak to the timing of this, I'm just curious, after budget deliberations or talks, whatnot, this comes about, I'm just curious why.
Your request was received from Mr. Grant Camps of the Curling Club. That this request be made of council, and we try to work with those community groups whenever we can. And so we brought it to you, acknowledging full well the timing is a few weeks earlier would have been much better, but came when it came, unfortunately.
Councillor Ross?
I think so. I heard there's a surplus from their original arena project that could carry over to this. Is that true or not? Or am I misunderstanding?
That is true. I would say though, just because there does seem to, just to be fully transparent about it, really the tack on of the curling club scope to the arena is simply because you have a contractor working there, you have a budget that's approved. And they happen to be in close proximity to one another, but they're totally different. I should say they're totally different projects. They are connected only in location and contractor. We've talked to the county about combining the projects, they're comfortable with it. But really, there's almost no interface with the arena project with this project. I would say that's being identified as a potential funding source more than anything.
So mathematically, it doesn't complicate the budget.
No, there will be no impact on the 2021 budget. We would propose to fund this project or our portion of this project from the unexpended funds that were previously allocated for the Arena One sound improvement project.
Thank you.
Councillor Hoekstra?
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. I don't know why I'm confused by the numbers. So we contribute 50% as owner of the facility, but the request will be only 26%, 26.56. Help me out there. Where am I
So
tripping?
there, well, it is confusing. So it's not you.
Okay.
So the issue is the county has previously considered a share in that building of 26.52% based on usership stats. The curling club has come forward and said, we'll pay 50% for this project. Normally, to be honest, we'd be looking for them to maybe be more like a 25% share, county 25, city 50, that sort of thing. But when someone offers 50, it's hard to say no to that. So we're gonna see where we end up with the county and see where we end up with the curling club. We wanna make sure we're being fair because I think it would not be reasonable, for example, for the curling club to pay 50, the county to pay 26, and then the city to pay 24. There's something a little not quite right there. So that's why we've asked to a maximum of 15,000 and to a maximum of 50% of the cost. We want to make sure we have the funds to be able to treat all our partners fairly and enough to complete the project.
Councillor Gullickson?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I'll make the motion and the council approve the amendment of the scope of the Arena One acoustic ceiling tile sound system upgrade for 2020 capital project to include an upgrade to the sound system in the curling complex, utilizing up to $15,000 of the remaining project budget to a maximum of 50% of the cost.
Any additional comments or questions? We'll call the question on all those in favor. That was unanimous. $528, so I think that was it on the end, Director Juke?
It is until in camera,
Okay,
but
that's not much anyway.
no, it will, because that's fine, Director Juke. I will handle the in-camera item, so you're for that, if you don't mind.
That was my point. I was hoping to complete those items for the sake of one individual anyway. Thank you. Okay. By the looks of things, we're not going to have a huge influx of individuals. It's nice to have one opportunity for one more. Choose to see the comment. It is 5:29, so I'm going to begin with the preamble, unless there's something that we need to discuss beforehand. Good? You've got it? Nope. That's good. Okay. So it is 5:30 PM and I declare the statutory public hearing for bylaw 400.32 open, and that this hearing is held pursuant to sections 7, 8, 230, 606, and 692 of the Municipal Government Act, RSA 2000, Chapter M26, and the request the legislative coordinator to confirm the purpose of this public hearing, that the statutory public hearing notice was advertised in the local newspaper, and that any written submissions received and not included in the public hearing agenda are read into the record.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Mayor Creasy and Council, the purpose of this public hearing is to allow the general public to provide input and express their views on bylaw 400.32, which was given first reading October 13th. Bylaw 400.32 proposes to amend the land use bylaw, rezoning part of Northwest Quarter Section 32-40-26-west of the 4th Meridian from future designation District FD to Residential Apartment District R6 in order to facilitate future residential development. For Section 606 of the MGA, requirements for advertising, public hearing notice was advertised as shown on page 3 of the council agenda package in the Macomb Express Thursday, October 29th and Thursday, November 5th. And Mayor Creasy and Council, we received one written submission that is proposed to be given in person by the submitter, Jackie Williams, this evening. I'm not certain if she's attended yet, if she's in the lobby.
She is in the lobby.
Okay, and she has indicated she wishes to read her submission to you. And in addition, we have Gord Bonchi attending remotely if there are any questions. And that's what I've got for presenters.
Thank you very much. So if in fact we do have an individual out there and we're able to stay within our COVID guidelines, I would ask that administration invite them in. Chief Gotti?
Just one minor correction there. I believe that Clerk Eddie Bowen identified Gord Bonji, but it is Mr. Stephen Bonji that is with us here tonight, representing developer. Good evening, Mr. Bonji.
We got the family name correct anyway. Very good. I would just remind that all persons giving oral presentations today are to clearly state their name, and presentations are to be brief and to the point. The order of the statutory public hearing presentation will be as follows. Our development officer or designate, which in fact will be our...
He'll speak on remotely. It's Craig Teal.
Mr. Craig Teal, wonderful. Then those in favor will speak, and those opposed, and then any person deemed to be affected who wishes to be heard. It is now 5:32, so I declare the public hearing for bylaw 400.32 open at 5:32. All right. Mr. Teal, Leonard Teal, are you prepared to start us off?
Yes, Your Worship. As soon as I take the mic off mute.
Not a problem. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. So the bylaw before council as part of this public hearing was also the subject of an update to the Trinity Crossing outline plan that was dealt with towards the end of September. It follows up on the addition of the second apartment site in that outline plan. Now moving on to the redesignation process, which sets the stage for possible subdivision and then the development permit further down the road. If council does approve the bylaw tonight, there is a subdivision application that would be the next activity that people would see happening on this particular site. The R6 district does allow up to 4-story apartment buildings. It allows the 60 to 70, 74 units, I believe, per the outline plan that are intended for this site. As of the writing of the RFD, Your Worship, members of council, we received no other further public feedback, comments or otherwise heading into tonight's public hearing, with the exception of the presenter that will speak shortly. With that, Your Worship, I'll point out that much like the outline plan, the proposed rezoning is consistent with the city's municipal development plan, which does encourage a more dense urban area in the future, getting up to that at least 15 units per hectare and higher where infrastructure will permit. The North Area Structure Plan for the same area supports the same kind of housing mix and density targets. And also the proposal is definitely consistent with the recently updated and approved outline plan. With that, I'd be happy to field any questions, Your Worship.
Thank you, Mr. Teal. Appreciate that. Does council have any questions of Planner Teal at this time? Very good. So as stated earlier, I would ask that those speaking in favor of this hearing, the opportunity to speak now. Am I safe in assuming that Mr. Steve Bonci would like to speak?
At least say approve.
I think perhaps your mute button is on. The next speaker in a few moments to see if he can locate the mute button there. I can see from this end that there's a line through the speaker, so.
Clerk Pettibone, can you just double check that you don't have the ability to mute him as the organizer of this meeting? I believe that was a feature added to Teams in the last couple of days.
Yes, from my account, I'm signed in as myself rather than the city streams, so I don't think I can do that. Just trying that. If you give me a moment, I can log out and then log back in again with a different account, and I probably will have that control.
Very good. Let's do that then.
Try that and see if that works.
Sorry for the technical difficulties, everyone, but that's certainly the judgment that we make.
To the south of where Trilogy is now, is that the front? Commercial.
I believe so, but I would say Director Thompson or Planner Teal would probably be the best to answer that. Planner Teal, can you hear me?
I can, Your Worship.
It's CAO Gowdy actually, but can you just confirm for council the land immediately south of the Trilogy apartment that is commercially zoned for neighborhood commercial, I believe it's C3 maybe, is that owned by the applicant or is that separately owned?
To my knowledge, CEO Gowdy, that is owned by another party, not Laybon Developments.
And in any case, it is separately titled, and even if it were held by Laybon Developments, they would be in a position to sell it should they choose anyway.
That is correct.
Thank you.
I think it's Tricon.
Thank you.
I thought I saw Tricon.
Yeah, trailer there.
Okay. So I'm on the other account here and I don't seem to have that ability. I'm wondering if Mr. Bonci would have better luck without video, but with audio only. Just in terms of bandwidth. Okay, let's try that.
Does he have the correct number to call in?
Oh, he's already on. He's watching us, but I'm having difficulty unmuting him. He looks like he's muted right now.
Correct. I believe all of the individuals are muted that appear on the screen here anyway.
Yeah, I don't, according to IT, I can't do that for him, but he should be able to if he's on, Teams. You know what, why don't, he can always phone in to the 1-800 number as well. We'll have audio, right? So we can try that. I'll email him right now with the telephone number.
I would appreciate that.
Okay, just give me a moment.
appreciate everyone's patience, but given this process is a highly regulated one, we're not given the latitude to stray too much from the prescribed outline. Painful as it can be at times like this when electronics won't cooperate.
Okay, Mr. Bonci has been sent an email with the contact information, and I'm also going to send it to him via Teams chat. So he has 2 avenues there. So it's, where's the, oh, there.
Hi, it's Steve. Steve Bonji.
Is now joining.
Hello, Steve.
I'm sorry about that. I don't know. I was pushing the little microphone and muting and unmuting, and technology just wasn't on my side this time.
We've all been there. Appreciate your patience and your persistence. This is Mayor Creasy speaking right now. As stated earlier, that you would have an opportunity to speak in favor of this rezoning. So the floor is yours now.
Thanks, Your Worship, and other members of council. I think our intention is fairly clear from the report. We've certainly come to learn over the last few years that Lacombe has a very large need for the type of housing that we're proposing in this instance. Our apartment building in Trinity Crossing has been full for quite some time now and remains that way this month, despite everything that's been going on and some of the challenges facing all of our Albertans. So with that, we look forward to offering hopefully another opportunity for the citizens of Lacombe to have access to yet another housing type. And I'm certainly happy to answer any questions that might come out of that as we move through this. But otherwise, I think Mr. Teal's kind of captured it all in his report here. But should you have any other questions of me, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you. Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Thank you, Mr. Bonci. So from my understanding, this next project is going to be a higher level of amenities than Trilogy. And also, what would be your timeline for construction?
Sure. So, yes, our intention would be the next building would be very similar in form and character kind of to the one that's there. But once you approach that number of units, it does allow you to have some more of those amenities. And exactly what they might look like, we're not sure yet because that building's not totally designed, but there's definitely, once you have enough people there to use them, it certainly makes sense to provide them. So that is something that we've contemplated as we start moving forward in the planning for this next building, but I can't tell you exactly what they'd look like today. That's certainly something we'd address in the development permit stage as we work through that. As for timeline, probably a 2021 start, which would be probably summer or maybe a little bit later, fall next year. We do still need to work through all the engineering and everything for a project like that. So while we do some kind of preliminary stuff before we get to this point, of course, we need to work through this process before we get too far down that road. But that said, it is an active market in Lacombe. There's certainly a demonstrated need for this type of housing in Lacombe. And it's certainly something that we would like to get going on probably sooner than later. Does that help?
Thank you, yes. Councillor Conick?
Thank you, Mayor Christie. So my question, Mr. Bonche, is the alignment of your, and I know it's early, it's very preliminary at this point, but the alignment of this next apartment building, will it be kind of an east-west alignment as the current building is, or will it more run north to south? And further to that, will you have a significant setback from the road as it is on the west side of the road today? Will you see a similar type of setback, or can you even comment on that at this point?
Sure. It would most likely be a north-south orientation. The other thing to keep in mind when you look at that site, which I think you can maybe kind of see in the drawings that you have there is some road widening and some pathway contemplated that kind of runs parallel to Sini Trail. So there's, in addition to the setback from included in the land use bylaws, the minimum setbacks, there's also some additional setback from the actual asphalt by way of those two things, and Mr. Teal might be able to speak to those with even a little more clarity. But I believe they're 4 meters each, if I recall. So there's that distance from Sini Trail as it exists, plus the required setback of the land use bylaw, but the building would be north-south orientation, most likely.
Okay, thank you.
So on that very subject, Mr. Wancha, I know that our our manager of planning has been in contact with you over some concerns that were brought forward, and I just wanted to thank you for being open to considering the enhanced vegetative screening and perhaps looking at some of the orientation of that building. And I'm certainly not going to put you on the spot here to be able to answer that at this stage of the game, because I know this is a little preliminary, but I do want to thank you for at least being open to the idea of considering it, and in an effort to be a good neighbor to those ones, or to those individuals that may not necessarily want to see it oriented the way that it was initially shown. So thanks for being open to consider alternatives anyway.
Sure.
Councillor Gullison, I think, was next.
Thank you, Mayor Casey. Well, that was my concern also, is the privacy issues on that the west side. And is the building going to be directly adjacent to Sini Trail, or is it going to be on the east side of the property?
Your Worship, generally, if you're familiar with how that site is laid out now, the parking would kind of carry west from where it is and move that building more towards the west side, just to utilize and maximize the efficiency of the parking lot that's already there, right? So we don't want to have to put the building kind of in the middle and then try to get people on the other side of it to park too. So you most likely end up with the building north-south orientation more towards the west side of that property.
And Mayor Creasy mentioned the idea of screening, and that would be done with trees, is that correct?
Yeah, generally that's best addressed with landscaping in this type of scenario.
Thank you. Councillor Oakeshott.
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. So I have two questions that are kind of unrelated, but I guess concerned neighbors are wondering what the value of an outline plan is if it can be changed so significantly in their mind with putting this building there. I don't know who would answer that.
I think that's probably a question best directed towards Planner Teal. Certainly, if Mr. Bonchi chooses to answer it, he's welcome to, but I think that's.
I would suggest that is certainly a question for planning professionals like Mr. Teal.
Planner Teal, did you hear that question?
Yes, I did, Your Worship.
Would you care to address it, please?
The value of the outline plans generally is to give a sense of how land use will be filled in, fleshed out a lot more than our typical general MDPs or an area structure plan and try to relate that more detailed product that a developer may come forward with the infrastructure needed to support it. Sometimes these plans are done for immediate build out. The economy's going quick. It'll be done in 2 or 3 years. So there's a high degree of certainty of the outline plan initially approved, what will actually be delivered on the ground. But sometimes things do change in the economy. And outline plans are quite bluntly, just like the North Area Structure Plan, which governs the same area, not set in stone. We have provisions to be able to respond to changing social needs, changing regulatory environment, or changing economic needs. And all of those changes, they're not done lightly. There is also an expectation for public consultation and scrutiny or review of all the same issues that went into the original creation of the outline plan.
Thank you. You have a follow-up? Go ahead.
I have a different question. This is more for Mr. Bonci. You said that you had a demonstrated need for a building like this. So was there a formal assessment of the city that we have a high waiting list for apartment type rentals? Or I guess I was curious how you could defend your demonstrated need for a building of this size.
Sure, that one's really easy to answer. When your building is full and you have phone calls coming with people looking for a place to rent and you're unable to provide it, that certainly shows that the market's not being met by the current inventory, and there's certainly appetite from the market for some more. So I guess my turn to be blunt, we certainly wouldn't want to build an apartment that nobody wants to live in, but when we're seeing that there's people coming to our door looking for this type of housing and unable to find it, it certainly suggests to us that there is a need for it.
Anyone else? So I'd ask, would you care to have a moment to summarize, Mr. Bonci, or are you satisfied with your input?
Your Worship, that's fine with me. Certainly, if anyone has anything else, happy to discuss, but otherwise, happy to move on.
Very good, thank you. I would ask at this time if anyone else chooses to speak in favor. Seeing none, just to be sure we have no one waiting outside chambers in consideration of COVID regulations. I think that seeing none, then we will move on to those opposed. And I would like to thank Ms. Williams for joining us. We had a rather lengthy conversation last week, I guess it was just late last week. And I will repeat publicly what I told you because there was perhaps some misunderstanding about process here and whatnot, is that everyone is given an opportunity for input at a public hearing. These are rather unusual times with the COVID and whatnot, so there's some considerations there, whether it be electronically. Video was not particularly fruitful this evening, but voice was. One way or another, we see that we want to make sure that everybody is heard, and I would like to hand the floor over to you. And for the record, let's have you state your name.
Jackie Williams. I live at 7109 Hanners Road, which is directly across from the Trinity development. So do I just read and then that's...
You're free to proceed however you would wish.
Okay, so I'd like to first thank you for allowing me to voice my concerns and ask questions regarding the rezoning of Trinity, the Laybon development from R1 to R6. I have talked to my neighbors about this rezoning, and most of them are saying there's no point in coming to a public hearing because they don't feel anybody cares. And us speaking up won't change anything because we're coming up against a big developer and we're just the little guys. So we're very concerned about this proposal and hoping that people will seriously consider our concerns. So in discussions with council members, I've been told that the rezoning in a new development area can be more lenient because it's a new development, allowing the developers to rezone. But I don't think council members realize that this apartment will be closer in proximity to the Henner's Landing homes than the way it's laid out than it will be to the actual Laban homes. So if you look at the map, the Laban outline crossing, they have a very a large undeveloped area to the north and east of their development, within their development, that a Laban apartment could go within that development that would be closer to their actual buildings and their residential homes than it would be to the established neighborhoods surrounding the Laban development. My understanding is Laban's, one of their objectives with building an apartment is that they make more money building an apartment as opposed to residential homes. And is it not the responsibility of council to protect the established neighborhoods from developers depreciating our property values? And when it comes to the point in the area of town where can it come to the point where there's too much density and the neighborhoods deteriorate? There is an unproportionate amount of density in this particular area of the city. And is there enough infrastructure to accommodate the increase in density in the north area? At the hearing for the last apartment, we were told that Terrace Heights Drive could accommodate 6,500 cars per day. But when you're driving down Terrace Heights Drive, it's not safe. It's very congested. There's cars along the roadway and difficulty for the kids getting off and on the buses. And from my understanding, like they said, that the apartment will be 74 plus apartments, and it's a massive building that will be directly across the road, like with minimal setback from the established homes in the neighborhood. And when, I know when council is voting on these decisions, I know there's a rush to increase the city's density, but do you consider the impact on the established neighborhoods? If the apartment runs north and south, 40 apartments and balconies will be able to look directly down into our backyards and into our windows, and there will be a complete loss of privacy. And this alone will depreciate our property values. And if Laban argues that point that it won't affect our property values, why don't they put it within their development around their residential homes? And in the previous outline plan, there was a green space running north and south along C&E Trail. And will the Laban development be required to keep that green space? And we have had 2 development plans mailed to us and both are different. And will Laban be required to meet the green space requirements within their development? With the last apartment, City Council and the planners told us that Terrace Heights was included in the North Area Structure Plan and that the schoolyard of the Terrace Heights School was calculated into green space calculation for Trinity. Probably why their green space area is so small. Green space requirements should be for Trinity alone and should be required to increase to the proposed increase in density. Once again, the apartment will decrease our property values, and Laban, in my opinion, doesn't care about this, but council should. The apartment will be much closer impactful to our homes than it will be to Laban. And I believe that is a strategic plan by Laban, and it's not right, especially when there are other areas for the apartment within their development. Council members have stated that they want to do what is best for the city, but the people are the city. I am the city and my neighbors are the city. Laban is not the city, and they will build and leave but the people actually living in Lacombe will be left with the fallout. Laybon should be required to move the apartment to another area of their development. As council members said, it's bare land, so this should be very easy to do. Then Laybon can be responsible for the impact it will have on their development. Proper infrastructure should be in place in advance and not after to accommodate the increase in density in this area of town. And Laybon should be restricted to at least running the apartment east and west rather than north and south. And they could accommodate that and have people come up Trinity Street across the front of the existing apartment building into a parking area. And then the building running east and west would have the least impact on the established neighborhood. The city could place more trees in the green space behind our homes along CNE Trail to buffer the size of the building. And Laybon could ask for more input from the area residents to decrease the impact on us. Laybon could increase the number of trees around their apartment and not just do the minimal amount that's required. And they could increase the setback. If they were going to go north and south, they could increase the setback closer to the back of their property rather than lining up directly across from our properties. So the north area of the city directly around the Henners area has the Cheris, the new Cheris building with 46 apartments. Royal Oak has 200 private and supportive living beds in that building. There is an abundance of row houses, duplexes, fourplexes, and eightplexes in this area of town. And this area of town has definitely met the city's plan on increasing housing mix and density. And when does too much density become detrimental to the neighborhood? So the Cheris development has already been zoned for an additional 100-bed supportive living site, 125-bed long-term care facility, and Royal Oak has also been zoned to add another 80-bed supportive living site. And all this zoning was done prior to Laybon requesting the rezoning for another 80-suite apartment complex. Council should decline this rezoning. Too many areas have already been zoned R6 for a very high density housing in a small demographic area. Even if council wants to increase density and housing mix, it has to be done responsibly, to do it reasonably, responsibly and fairly with an even distribution throughout the city while considering and protecting the existing established neighborhoods and the taxpayers' quality of living and property values in the process. Please decline this rezoning proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. Appreciate your presentation. You had a lot of information in your presentation, which is great. I'm just wondering, Planner Teal, could you speak to the density in the area? It was suggested that the density there is higher than most of the rest of the city, and I think that council would be interested in knowing if it is or is not, or do you have that information available?
Thank you, Your Worship. Unfortunately, no, I have not had a chance to check the density in all the surrounding areas. We can say with certainty that the density for the Trinity Crossing outline plan area, the 40-acre block owned and being developed by Laybon, definitely is going to be 20 units per hectare, which I would say is probably the earliest development in that area, meeting the new expectations of the 2015 MDP, which encouraged going to 15 units per hectare, higher if possible. I'm afraid I am not up to speed on the actual build-out densities or the outline plan densities of the surrounding neighborhoods.
Okay, thank you for that information. And Can you speak to the green space requirements? It was suggested that there was some green space allowances made previously. Are those still in place, or is there an expectation for change in that regard as well?
Okay. Yes, thank you, Your Worship. So the original Trinity Crossing outline plan was written as part of the quarter being developed. So that includes the Terrace Heights area to the south. And so some of those comments about the school space being located in the 40-acre block below Terrace Heights is accurate, and based on the presentation from the speaker. Each block of land is still expected to provide 10% municipal reserve dedication in either land or cash. And certainly the fact that the school is in the Terrace Heights area still means that Laybon's expected to meet that municipal reserve requirement. The open space that is provided includes 2 local tot lots or playground areas, which are quite proximate to the high density housing and the existing housing area, and a series of linear parks. Beyond that, there is no need for a large open space like another school site, since it's already been provided in Terrace Heights. And if I recall, part of the comments was what happened to the strip along the east side of the C&E Trail. That remains in the outline plan. As land is subdivided and dedicated, that 4 to 5 meter wide strip, in addition to the road widening, which is itself a 5 to 6 meter wide strip, would be acquired by the city as the developer goes ahead with development. So that's still in the plan. I'm not sure if that addresses all of your points about the open space.
Thank you. It does. I think that's an important point that our past speaker was interested in was the allowance for the road widening, as well as the green space allowance there, so that it would thereby increase the distance between the existing neighborhood to the west and any proposed development that we're considering this evening. So thank you for that information. Chief Gowdy?
Planner Teal does not have the benefit of time to look it up, but I was able to. The Terrace Heights outline plan has a density of 12.5 units per hectare. So quite a bit below the 20 that is proposed for this area.
Thank you. And would either you or Director Thompson care to touch on the infrastructure question that was brought up?
Director Thompson, I assume we have reviewed the infrastructure and can comment on the same.
So during the outline plan amendment, Laybon was required to look at the infrastructure impacts, the capacity of the road network, the capacity of the water, sewer, and storm infrastructure to accommodate the rezoning or the proposed change. And they have confirmed, their engineers have confirmed that there is the capacity of road networks and the underground infrastructure to handle the increased density. There's no doubt that the increased density will cause more traffic to be driven on those roads. But we can say that the roads have the capacity to handle that traffic based on commonly accepted engineering standards.
Thank you. Councillor Hibbs?
Thank you. I just have a question about the density. So when that's calculated, is that calculated based on the fact that you have all that school green space? Because I'm having a real hard time hearing that the density is somewhat low in the Terrace Heights area, because it can't be. So can you clarify?
That does include the school site in the Terrace Heights outline.
Okay, so that is, I think, an important point of clarification, because in fact, that whole neighborhood is relatively high density, because you have a significant amount of narrow lot, single dwelling homes already. You have a number of duplexes and row housing. You already do have an apartment building and now a proposed second apartment building. So I just want people to understand, if they don't live in that neighborhood or frequent that neighborhood, that in fact is, by anybody's definition, a high density neighborhood. So despite what the numbers say, it's skewed by the fact that there's a lot of green space in a very specific location.
So just so everybody can have a better handle on those types of calculations, that's the same regardless of the location where we're at. There's allowances made for green spaces, for municipal reserve, for schools, for more of what people think is green space as opposed to a building area like that. And currently, that entire area is at 12.5 units per.
So that is the Terrace Heights outline plan. That would not include Trinity Crossing. So the apartment that you referenced, which I would say probably does qualify as high-density housing, is not in the Terrace Heights outline plan. To call the Terrace Heights outline plan a high-density area, I think that would be perhaps by rural standards, it would be considered high-density, but semi-connected housing is the very definition of medium-density housing. High-density housing is, of course, high-rises, and you're getting up into 80 units per hectare. That's sort of a density.
Thank you. Councilor Ross.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. So having lived in Henders, and with all due respect, I did not live along Henders Road adjacent to CNE Trail. But I guess as council, when we get into the public hearings in the past 3 years, I wish the process was different, where there was some more consultation with neighbors prior to, so that developers could have the express interest of the community to, you know, okay, why couldn't it be east and west on the north side, for example, like, and with, you know, significant vegetation and to have curbside appeal and so forth, that we wouldn't get to this point of council being the face of position between the neighbors and get between development that we're so much trying to address a market need. Having been on affordable housing and having to change personally my residence, it was incredibly hard to find a rental property. It was at this time. They choose as a developer to go to where the market is demand. And right now, in this economy, it's rental properties. It's not housing. And I agree, to the north and to Royal Oak, that's already significant. Having lived in Henders, personally, I drove from the north. I could go all the way down Highway 2, come in from the north faster than going through town. So there is alternate routes from Terrace Heights. Although I do agree with you, the risk that I think in our traffic evaluation in 2021, that these speeds could be lowered so that the police service has the option to have an enforcement, because at 50 kilometers an hour, you can't hand out a ticket at 55, but if it was 40, you could. So I think there's, in the future, some things to address the concerns through the strategic plan and readdressing it. I don't know if the developer would recognize some of the concerns that you went east-west of the other one, or why don't you go in farther? And yet we're in the position trying to, I guess, would the developer be open to go east-west on the north side? And I guess that's a question to Mr. Bonte.
Well, as outlined earlier, those questions were posed, and while it would not be appropriate of us to expect to have that nailed down, there was consideration for building orientation and for landscaping enhancements in consideration of the development to the existing development lots immediately to the west. Any additional questions from council? Ms. Williams, you obviously put a great deal of time and effort into your presentation. I would offer you the opportunity to give us a concluding statement if you so choose.
I just had a couple of questions too that I still don't understand how Terrace Heights can be included in the calculation of green space when it's a new development on its own. Why they're calculating into is it not based on just Trinity Heights and the density that they have within that development and the green space required dependent on that density? And I think the most frustrating part for everybody in the neighborhood, because I know, Jonathan, if it was in there, it won't impact your house as much because according to the outline plan, it'll cut off before. But if Laban had just consulted, like, it seems to me that there can be a win-win with the density, meeting density requirements, meeting, like, there's a need for rental property, but how do you justify, because there's an issue with that within the city, putting all that onus on one area of town? That without being included in the planning, there could be, they could move the building, they could come in on Trinity Street, go across the front of their buildings and into the parking area, which is already there for the first building. There's ways running the building east and west. There's lots of ways that it could be done. We're putting it deep within their development so that it doesn't impact our established neighborhood that's been there for quite some time. And then I know that within the Trinity development, you have a density requirement within that development, but does council look at Royal Oak with 200 beds, the new terrace building with 42 beds, the proposed 100-bed supportive living, the 125-bed long-term care, and another supportive living complex going in at Royal Oak probably within the next couple of years of 80 beds. So even though they're kind of in little bits and pieces of different development areas, they're all in one area. Plus there's a row housing, there's duplexes, there's fourplexes. They built 8plexes recently. They're building more duplexes down by the row housing. You just can't dump it all in one area and expect in the long term that that's a sustainable neighborhood. I guess that's all, I think Laban could have worked with the area, with council to make it better for everybody. And I guess that's it. It's gonna have a huge impact on our property values.
Thank you. So with respect to densities, I know that can be a difficult thing to see from a distance when you're talking about different plans and different areas and whatnot. So I would offer the opportunity to Planner Teal to once again outline how the densities are in that this specific area of concern, and how I believe it was the school area to the south figures into those calculations. Just one moment though, please.
So
Chief Cuddy?
Planner Teal, specifically, I'd like you, if you can, to please comment on how the deferred reserve obligation from one outline plan can be placed on another outline plan within the same area structure plan.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I'm gonna have to give some thought to the deferred reserve question for a second. So I guess first up, in terms of density, it's always important to remember whenever we look at small areas and we try to put in a mix of housing, it's going to be skewed. And density is an interesting thing, and you're always trying to relate the amount of development to a set geographic area. Sometimes our geographic area is a quarter section, sometimes it's 40 acres, sometimes it's a large, almost half section area. So when you look at some of the plans that are done in the north area, the Terrace Heights area south of Terrace Heights Drive is the lower density part of an 80-acre block of land. It's offset by the higher density, a proposed now approved higher density area of Trinity Crossing lying north of Terrace Heights. When you average those two together, I think that's where you come back to the number that I heard earlier, talking around that 12 to 13 units per hectare. So 12 to 13 units per hectare, if you want to put that in comparison, is somewhat where the city of Red Deer was building back in 2004, 2005. And as the urban areas evolve, one of the things that we tend to find is that Our expectations around density between the economics and what we find livable and what's needed to support commercial areas, to support public transit, will gradually increase. So by way of comparison, that 12 units per hectare over the entire 80-acre block is probably about, well, we're in Calgary, we'd be shooting for 21 units per gross hectare. The other thing that's hard to relate when you compare plan to plan is depends on how the density issue was recorded. So if it's not based on the same gross density, which is sometimes a struggle to get as you have different consultants doing outline plans, it's hard to come back and just say, oh, here's our standard density. The MDP bases it on gross developable area. And that's basically how the Trinity Crossing outline plan has been written. Its counterpart across the street for the Henner's Landing entire area is a very large area. It speaks to net density as opposed to gross density. And all of a sudden the number looks dramatically different at 37 units per net hectare. But that's because they're calculating it based on a different area of land. If we were to work it back, we're probably coming back to very comparable levels of density. If at an extreme, if we don't allow offsets to happen, a high density spike where we have an apartment, a lower density spike where we have lower density housing, we'll find that we'll never be able to achieve either our density targets or the housing mix targets. If you always have to keep a low density across an entire apartment site, you simply just won't have an apartment site. Similarly, when we look at the open space system, and I'm not sure if this is going to get to CAO Gowdy's question about deferred reserve, we look at the needs of the entire neighborhood. And where does a school most logically have to go? And sometimes that's based on, well, we need a site, and this is the area we have to work with as the school division needs a site to be provided. And after that, over the course of, say, an entire quarter section, you get more localized parks or linear connections. And I think that's what you're seeing happening between Terrace Heights and Trinity Crossing here. There are two local isolated playground, local tot lot type areas within the 13 or hectare area, immediately proximate or within very short walking distance of the multifamily. The school site itself is also still within 300 meters. And so that issue of, we look at what kind of layout of open space we'd like to achieve is one aspect. And then the mechanics of the deferred reserve is at the time of subdivision, when we go to get the land using the legal requirements under the MGA, sometimes a developer may over-dedicate in one area and they're able to offset that in another. Sometimes they may under-dedicate and they use a tool called the deferred reserve caveat to transfer it over. Other times it's an issue of, well, we don't really need any more land in the area. If they don't have any land dedicated to the city, we'll look at the cash and lieu tool, which is basically what the Trinity Crossing outline plan says, is once the city gets the land needed to provide the open space projected to be needed for the future 575 residents of that area, and there's still something outstanding, Laban is not left off the hook. They're still expected to make up the obligation just like any other land developer, and that would take the form in this particular case of cash and lieu, which then in itself is spent on the park system elsewhere within the community. Sorry, Your Worship, a lengthy answer. Hopefully that sheds a bit of light on the density and the open space issues.
No, I know it's a complicated subject. We appreciate your expertise. So thank you. Any other questions for council? If not, I will ask if there's anyone else who chooses to be heard that is opposed to bylaw 400.32. And just to confirm, there's no one in the waiting area. And I'm obligated to ask that any person deemed to be affected who wishes to be heard. Once again, there's no one waiting out there. Very good. Any additional questions from council? It is 6:24 p.m. I declare the public hearing for bylaw 400.32 closed. So I think we've got some people online and here that would be interested in hearing 5.4, so I believe that we will adjust our to go there now. So the land use bylaw 400.32 Trinity Crossing R6 rezoning. Director Thompson.
Sure. With the conclusion of the public hearing, we are asking for council to give consideration to second reading for the rezone and third reading for the rezone.
Thank you. We're for second reading. Councillor Conick.
I would so move that council gives second reading of bylaw 422.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Anything before we move to second reading vote? Councillor Gullikson.
Thank you. I just want some clarification on the screening and protecting the sight lines on the west side. Do we have any real authority or the ability to ensure that gets done?
Planner Teal is the opportunity to council to add specific conditions that are to be added to the building permit or development permit when applied for there, such that they would be able to require enhanced screening on the west side or a building orientation west to east rather than north to south? Or would that be exceeding the authority of council under the MGA?
Thank you, Your Worship. Certainly at the time of rezoning, you could set parameters around the specific site. If your council is interested in going down that route, I would encourage you to, take some time to consider that as an amendment to the bylaw and look at how it would relate to this particular site and those particular issues that were raised in the context of the public hearing.
Thank you.
So just to summarize, you certainly are able to add conditions. However, every condition that you add will affect the developability of the lot. And so, like Planner Teal, I would encourage you to be cautious and make sure there's due consideration for what those impacts might be before imposing additional conditions beyond your land use bylaw that are not imposed on other developers in the community.
Thank you. Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Mayor Christie. Question to Manager Teal or CEO Gowdy. Can the developer go higher than 4 floors so that it would be more accommodating within the area that he has to work with?
Your land use bylaw limits you to, is that true or has that been updated? I'm sorry, Director Thompson, is there still a limitation of 4 floors within the city of Lacombe? Yes, thank you. So you would not be able to ask him to go higher than 4 floors. That would actually be disallowed by your land use bylaw.
So if I may continue, sorry. Is that an added cost in engineering to go higher, or is that just a common, what most apartment buildings are only 4 floors?
That's against our existing.
I realize that, but if that was to be considered for changing, is that a considerably added cost to the developer because of engineering or structural engineering costs when you start getting up to, like, say, 5 or 6 floors? To, like, for example, that was different options for direction within distance.
So I wouldn't want to comment on areas that I'm not well educated on, and so it's tough for me to say the cost side. But I would say that the land use bylaw is there in the city because that's the limitation of our effective firefighting capacity. And so I really,
my apologies.
I really don't think you have the ability to go higher than 4 floors. Also, I think typically 4 floors can be timber construction, whereas above that, the building code requires alternate material.
Okay, thank you. Sorry for expanding on that.
So I guess one thing that I would like to say is that I do value the input from our manager of planning, and when she suggested this particular developer was open to the idea of increased landscaping and whatnot to help buffer the transition. I have every expectation that that will be fulfilled, and for the developer to even entertain an orientation change or a floor plan layout change in order to to better accommodate them, to that even be considered, I think is, at this stage, is a pretty positive statement from a developer who has added a lot to our community. I realize that we have the obligation to balance development with the wishes of people in our community, but we also have to balance the development in our community with everyone within the city, not just neighbors immediately adjacent to any development area. Councillor Jacobson.
Sure. So as the one presenter alluded to, I live on the street backing onto this. I thought I was going to back onto this, but I guess I'm just on the outside of it. But so regardless, just a couple things for context. I think it's important to keep in mind that, I mean, I would only assume, but if this developer could profitably develop and liquidate his lots as it was originally planned out, I'm pretty sure they would happily do so without going through this process. You know, they're obviously the largest developer and builder in Central Alberta. They're obviously not lacking for want of opportunities here and there to deploy capital. But I would like you to consider also that, especially in new developments in the city, we're not talking about infill and new developments. If we're not, frankly, going to be market-based in our approach and open to developers coming and saying, hey, look, we've been slashing at this for 6 years. This isn't going well. This is where the market is. This is what the market is saying. We're responding to a market signal. If we're not willing to accommodate that in our new developments, where are we going to accommodate that? Right. So we don't have just developments all over the place where we can, have an abundance of developers trying things out. There's really only 2 areas of town where there's any sort of major new development activity. And this is the one that's within the most built up areas. This is the one that technically should be moving the most. And, for those of you who drive by there and know that area of town, you'll know that their single family has been grinding out 1 or 2 a year for the last 5-6 years. These sort of operational questions about engineering and all that kind of thing are sort of interesting. But the thing I think we just need to consider is very simply, is R6 appropriate for that area, or for the area of this particular subdivision? And again, I'm sure that all the doors are going to be slammed to me on my street tomorrow. But again, as the mayor said, we need to make decisions that are in the best interest of the entire city, not just one particular street. And in a new development, a brand new development, to have a developer who wants to rezone, to respond to a market signal, deploy upwards of $5 million of capital that's going to put a property tax assessment on the piece of land that's one of the few zonings that actually makes the city money. I think we would be sending a pretty dangerous signal not to consider this on its merits. So I'll definitely be supporting the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Connick.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I guess it boils down to when I was first elected, there was a real demand for rental housing, such as apartments, and there was no new apartments that had gone up back 10 years ago, 11 years ago. And then Layvon took the initiative to build this first one, and it quickly became apparent that there was a need for that because that building, it took a little while, but it did fill up. And then soon enough, 2 more new apartments went up in Mackenzie, and those 2 are quickly at, well, one is already full and the other is approaching capacity as well. So there's a real, I feel for the neighbors on that particular street, but when demand seems to indicate that this is what's needed in our community, as Councillor Jacobs has alluded to, it has to be what's best for the city as a whole. And as Councillor Ross has alluded to as well, that, in this economy, there seems to be a real, I think demand will even increase even further as you see those people who cannot maybe continue to live in their homes, downsize or forced out. They're going to be looking for alternative housing, and this is what they're going to be looking for, more of these apartments. So yeah, I understand the citizens who live there and their frustration. I live up in there. I know it's busy. I live in Terrace Heights, but Terrace Ridge rather. But it's yeah, when the demand is obvious, we have to adhere to that and do what's best for the community. And so I would support the motion as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? So we've got second reading before us, I believe, do we not? That was put forth by Councillor Connacht. Is there any additional input on second reading? I will ask the question then. All those in favor? Those opposed? So noted. Mr. Pettibone, let the record reflect that Councillor Hibbert was opposed to that motion.
Thank you. One opposed.
Remainder in favor. Thank you. Councillor Jacobson.
I move that council give third reading to bylaw 400.32.
Thank you. Any additional questions or concerns with this item? I have nothing further to add than what I've said already, but as much as I always feel for people that are, especially on a fringe area like this, of between a established and new development, this is rarely an easy transition. But in this particular case, especially, I am encouraged by the fact that we have a developer willing to entertain additional requirements in order to satisfy area residents, fully realizing he is not really under any obligation to do so other than to be a respectful neighbor. So I very much appreciate that. Anyone else? With respect to third and final reading of bylaw 400.32, Trinity Crossing, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor and those opposed? The outcome, you're able to weigh this?
Thank you, yes.
Very good. Thank you, everyone. That leaves us with
Mayor Creasy.
Councillor Connacht, go ahead.
If I may, could we, in light of the fact I have to leave at 7, could we do 5.3 before we do 5.1 and 5.2? If possible.
I see no reason why we couldn't start with 5.3. Does anybody have any objection to that? Very good, we will do that. 2021 operating budget and 3-year financial plan. Senior Manager Reyes.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Tonight, my
Is now
presentation,
exiting.
tonight my presentation is briefer than presentations that I have given on October 13th and October 26th. But at the end of my presentation, I'll be happy to answer any questions that council may have. The 2021 operating budget was first presented to council on October 13th in preparation for council budget deliberations, which occurred on October 26th and October 27th. Prior to budget deliberations, council was provided with detailed copies of departmental budgets for council review and consideration. The 2021 proposed operating budget reflects council's direction to prepare an operating budget that reflects a 0.8% tax increase. I'll highlight a couple of minor changes that we have made since the last budget that council saw on October 26th. Number one, we decreased the operating grant to Ecolacom by $6,000, so now it's 0. And you can see that change on appendix number 4. The second change that we made is we increased transfers to reserves by the same amount. by $6,000. So you will see that change on appendix number 5. So now you will see that there is a $6,000 being transferred to general operating. So that will be the first line that you see on appendix number 5. Those are the only two changes that have been made since the last time the council saw the budget. Appendix number 1 summarizes what the 2021 proposed budget is. Appendix number 2 summarizes what the 2021 to 2023 financial plan is. It is important to emphasize that the 3-year plan is not a budget, it's only a plan, except the 2021, which is what council will be approving tonight, should council wish to do so. Finally, administration is recommending 2 motions for council consideration tonight. First, that council approve the 2021 operating budget as presented, or shall I say adopt? Second, that council receive the 2021-2023 financial plan as information. And with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Senior Manager Reyes. Councilor Hoekstra.
I'll make the motion that council adopts proposed 2021 operating budget as presented.
Thank you. Anyone wish to speak on the operating budget? Seeing none at this time, I know you'd all be disappointed if I didn't bring up again snow removal. I'm going to do so for a couple of reasons. I think during our budget workshops, I went through them. Perhaps I failed to clearly outline the implications of the snow removal plan as put forward. I think there was some $72,000 or $75,000, whatever it was, that was potentially to be allocated for this, and that I think that it was seen as perhaps a bit frivolous in that it was going to increase the tax rate, and it was certainly not my intent to increase the tax rate to our citizens. However, I just struggle with the fact that we're investing a large amount of money in infrastructure to the tune of some $900,000, a large portion of which, not all, but a large portion of which is dedicated towards a snow storage facility. And in my opinion, I think it's unreasonable of us to expect the city to be in a decent position to be able to utilize that facility in accordance with Alberta Environment guidelines in future if we don't at least go through some sort of a process whereby they can determine what the potential long-term costs and impacts are going to be on our community. So without them actually knowing trucking requirements, which I believe that accounted for the majority of this money was for third-party trucking. You know, in saying that, $70,000, $75,000, I get that. But I think this is a significant increase in level of service that not only satisfies Alberta environment regulations, but will be something that is noticed by pretty much everyone in our community. I don't think anything that we do affects each and every one, but the vast majority of the people will be affected by this. And oddly enough, throughout most of the year, not just in the snow time. I know that the complaints that are fielded by staff in this building and Public Works will be severely less if in fact we were to entertain this procedure, all while giving our staff, senior staff, some sort of an idea what we could possibly be in for to manage, you know, in the future. This may in fact, all this money may in fact not be spent. It may not be enough, and I don't think anybody's really in a position to that, but that was the best outlined estimate that was given to us by staff. So I guess it would be something that I would like for us to consider. And I would propose that we would adjust for that cost up to that maximum cost by adjusting our contributions to reserve balances, which are contributions to reserves are not a bad thing, but I think that they are certainly aggressive, especially considering the financial times that we're in now. Once again, that's not a bad thing, but I think that there is room for some compromise here. So it's something I'd like for us to consider. Councillor Gullickson.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Just some clarification, that snow removal site won't be available to us till next year, is that not correct? And if we have additional snow removal this year and snow pile, it'll be going on the site of our new building, is that correct?
Yes.
Would that affect our startup time because it won't melt until July?
I am not anticipating that it would affect the startup time though.
When is our startup time for the new building?
We have not identified a startup time yet. I'm confident we will be starting in 2021.
Okay.
That's a pretty broad time, but the time nonetheless.
It is a pretty broad time, yeah.
Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. So we've gave administration direction to bring a budget of 0.8%. So through our deliberation, we cut several areas that were some, I think most of it was capital, correct me if I'm wrong, through the budget deliberations. If we maintained the capital of some of what we subtracted and purchased 2 more trucks of our own to address the trucking, because I feel maybe in the future blading 2A might be an option with another truck as well. But there are many trucks with very low kilometers in this economy that could maybe be able to be purchased very economically, that with what capital we deducted from our budget deliberations, rather than increasing operational, that is, and reducing money into reserves, is that another option?
So that's certainly something that could be considered. I expect we're going to hear that trucks don't run themselves and there'll be some.
Absolutely.
Some staffing requirements that may be involved.
Bringing up an option.
Chief Cuddy?
So I think that is the issue, is that you'd have staffing costs, and right now that we are resourced in terms of our trucks for the fleet that we need 85% of the time, and 15% of the time that we need to augment with commercial contractors. And so to add trucks for 100% of the time, you're going to be over-resourced 100% of the time potentially, or sorry, 85% of the time, because 15% of the time you need those trucks. And so you really, I think you would have more resources than you required most of the time, and you still have the obligation to register, insure, house, and operate that vehicle, do the commercial vehicle inspections quarterly, and I think you'd be quite a bit higher overall cost, actually.
That affect more operational than capital.
I do, however, think that's a good point to bring up, and I think that it was my hopes that an operational year where there was kind of a trial period to test this, it will answer some of those questions that may in fact, there may be a better alternative in future years, but be that as it may. Chief Cuddy?
Sorry, I didn't mean to be flippant about your winnings as it's starting. We haven't gotten that far. We are still evaluating our project delivery methods of whether it's going to be a design build or a design and tender. And so we're just not actually at the stage where I can say a defined time. We would expect early to mid-year, depending on how we deliver that project.
Councillor Connick?
Thank you, Mayor Christie. So the mayor is correct that in my time on council, that absolutely year over year, it's always been that we can do more for our stone removal and the windrows. I've had the pleasure of having a windrow on my front lawn for my entire time in this community, and yeah, it's not always pleasant, that's for sure. And is there a way we can just accommodate increase? Like, I think we've done a incredible job at 0.8, but I mean, what's, if we went to 0.9% tax increase, would that accommodate the $75,000 increase?
1% is equivalent to $150,000. 0.1 would be equivalent to 15,000. Therefore, it has to be 0.5%, 75,000.
Closer to half point, which is
I see.
substantial, I think, considering where we're at.
Yeah.
Chief Gotti?
So if council is looking for a way to make this happen, and I guess I would say administratively, this is something that we would support only because of the amount of complaints we do receive because of, due to the gravel. I would suggest looking at some of those reserve contributions where we are proposing to remedy past practices that have left those reserves in negative balances, and rather than fully ameliorating those negative balances in 1 year, taking a partial step towards their elimination with the goal and the knowledge that the next year it would return to zero. So with that in mind, if council wanted to move ahead, I would propose our administrative recommendation to make that happen. I believe it's $71,000. Is that correct? Do you know?
71 and change, 72 is what I had on top of my mind.
So I would propose taking 25,000 from the $50,000 community builder reserve contributions. You'll recall that last year that was 0 contribution. I would propose a one-time, the recreation facilities reserve contribution, rather than increasing to $120,000 from $35,000 in 2020, we would take a partial step, take $25,000 there, so the contribution would be $95,000 for an increased reserve contribution in that reserve of $60,000, and $20,000 off of the proposed parks and playgrounds trail development reserve contribution. So instead of moving from 20,000 in 2020 to 60,000 in 2021, it would be 20,000 to 40,000. So in all cases, you're still a significant increase in the reserve contributions over the 2020 amounts in those reserves, but it would allow you to facilitate this service level without a direct tax rate increase. So direct tax rate increase. Over time, everything comes down to the tax rate.
Well, I was going to say, money spent is money spent, and I fully appreciate that. And this, I've had enough input over this one that, a tax increase is not seen, but I think that the majority of residents would very much appreciate this change that falls within a doable dollar figure, in my opinion. That's Councilor Hibbs.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. So I'd like to just reiterate my comment before that rather than going all in, that it is stepped into if council decides to proceed with it, so that it isn't the full 70-odd thousand, that it's maybe half that, so that you're only addressing maybe doing priority 2 roads or however it is that you guys decide what roads get, done first, whatever. I get that this is a service that's called for. I just have a problem with timing. I'm concerned about the sustainability of saying we're gonna cut back on reserve contributions, because there are so many times projects that we fund in these budgets, that's where the dollars come from, because we're putting that money aside now because we know we have projects coming up in the future. And when we shortchange or have to play catch up because they did some funky stuff in the past, it causes problems, because now you have to look at either not doing the project or you have to look at borrowing. I'm just concerned about the sustainability. Yes, we could get away with it for this year and maybe we could get away with it next year, but what about going forward? Because it's only going to get more and more expensive. And especially right now, we cannot be increasing taxes like it's just a minor thing to add another 0.1% or whatever. People are hurting and they don't need us on top of it saying that, oh, well, now's a great time, we're gonna add all this stuff. Well, that's great, but if you don't have the money to pay for it, and residents, I mean, then that's a wonderful service, but they can't afford it. So I guess I actually speak against this as a whole right now, saying that this is a great idea, but it's just not right now. But if we do have to proceed with it, I would beg council to consider that half implementation is the way to go at this point in time. And then at the next year, we could reevaluate and say, you know what, that worked out great. We got great feedback from our community. They were in support of it. Let's go ahead with the rest. That's my call.
Thank you, Councillor Hibbs. Just to be clear, I would suggest that we're not necessarily cutting reserve contributions. In fact, the items that have been identified there are already at substantial increases over last year.
I agree, but we're cutting it from what we had agreed on during our budget deliberations. And those are increases for a reason. And so I think that is fine.
Yep, fair. Councillor Clark?
My only comments to Councillor Hibbs is I don't agree with the half-in approach, because as I've mentioned, I've always had a windrow on my front lawn. So do I get to be half-in this year or not? I mean, I think it's either all or nothing, because I think you're gonna run into people who said, well, how come that his windrow got taken off his front lawn and mine wasn't? It's either you're all in or you're all out, to be quite frank. You can't go half-in on that measure, because those that get left behind with the windrow will be alienated in the end, I think. So I don't mind, like I say, it's something I've heard year over year over year. I would agree with the mayor, maybe this is, when is there a good time to do it? I mean, next year, I don't know if it's gonna be any better or not. I mean, we also, I agree with the idea of cutting the reserves. I suggested maybe a little bit of a tax increase, but if that's the road we don't wanna go, then fine, then do the reserve cut, but you can't go half in on that, I don't think.
Councillor Jacobson?
Sure, I'm gonna speak in a hybrid to what's been said before. Yeah, so I'm on record, I also don't support this time. I get windrowed every year. Life goes on. However, if council does want to go ahead with this, I would only support this motion if it was accompanied by a tax increase. I understand that our reserve contributions are higher than last year, but as Councillor Hibbs said, there was reasons for that to replace negative reserve balances and whatnot. And again, I'm more worried about next year and the year after for our finances, and there is a reason we do these reserve contributions. And if this is a service level that the city council determines that the citizens want, it should be paid for by the citizens by increasing revenue. So if the motion for discussion did not include an accompanying tax increase to offset that revenue, I would not support it. But if it did, I would support the motion.
Councillor Hoekstra.
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. I was just going to say I feel very conflicted because I understand the snow removal issue, but I would want to argue the point that our reserve contributions, I think you said, were aggressive, and I don't think they are, because I'm 100% supporting Councillor Hibbs. Or even Councillor Jacobson about we have to prepare for the future. 2021 it's still not going to hit us. I too think about the tax increase is the way to go, because citizens need to know that an increase in service level does cost. And if we try to hide the cost, because when we don't add to reserves, your average citizen does not feel it. And so I'm with adding a tax increase in order to make this work.
Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I guess I like the previous quotes that we given upon debt service. For example, if our building was previously brought up as $75,000, our lease would serve $2 million in debt. If we had this $75,000 annual $75,000, that'd be $4 million to replace a fire hall that we need in 2022 or 2023. And anyways, personally, I would like to see the possible potential of building permits that are the potential of them in 2021 and have the snow removal site finished, and to see more building permit outcomes that is rumored to take place. I'd like to see a shovel on the ground prior to that and see more cash flow in terms of that before supporting it. Thank you.
Anyone else? Chief Gotti?
Just a point for council's discussion, adding 0.75, I'm sorry, 0.5 to the tax rate increase would take you from 0.8 as proposed today to 1.3. CPI was 1.6. The additional 0.5 would generate approximately $75,000 of taxation. So if that were the preferred option, we would recommend moving it from 0.8 to 1.3 if council looks to fund that service level through tax rate, direct tax rate.
Councilor Dawson?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Did we not have an increase of $475,000 on our franchise fees? And does that not represent the 4.7% increase or 4% increase in taxes?
So yes, there was a change. Now, a portion of that increased revenue is from a changed franchise fee rate, and a portion is from increased revenues from the utility companies due to increased sales and an increased price on their end. So yes, if you were to equate the entire amount as relating to the franchise fee, you are in that range for sure.
So, and that's not reflected, well, it is reflected in our budget, obviously.
Yes.
So indirectly, we've already had an increase to our taxes, in my opinion. And so I can't support this either. I mean, for me, myself, if we have a heavy snowfall year, does that all of a sudden turn into $150,000? Or, you know, 90,000, or we don't really know what those numbers are. I think we need our reserves to be in a position, if we have a heavy snowfall year, to meet the requirements or that we have now even. So I can't support it either.
Very good. I think we can plainly see how this is gonna go, so we will have a direct line from the complaint department to each and every one of you who vote against it. No, I'm being flippant, I find it quite humorous because quite honestly, I have not, nor will I ever have windrows in front of my home. But I do think this is something that affects our community, but I can see that no one's prepared to bring forth a motion, so we can move on after substantial discussion. Councillor Kotick.
I believe there is a motion on the floor.
There is a motion by Councillor Hoekstra that council adopt the proposed 2021 operating budget as presented.
So then there would have to be
Correct.
an amendment to that first, that would have to be
Has
passed.
to be defeated and then amended.
How does that work?
No, could be amended.
Could be amended.
Thank you.
Could be amended, but I don't think it's worthwhile. Well, I meant specifically for one regarding snow removal. I didn't mean for the operating budget itself. So does anybody care to speak in regards to the operating budget overall before we vote? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. That was unanimous. Thank you, Councillor Kotick.
Thank you.
And were we requiring a separate one for the 3 years as well?
Or at least never operated that.
Councillor Hoekstra.
I move that council receive the 2021 to 2023 year financial plan as information.
Thank you. Any input on that item? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor?
Oh, I'm still here. Okay.
Yeah, you can vote. That was passed unanimously as well. Next up is the item 5.2, the 10-year capital plan. Manager Reyes?
May we go for 5.1 first, only because the capital budget will affect the 10-year plan?
Absolutely my mistake. I had crossed out 23 budget, seeing that was, thinking that was the operating rather. So yes, item 5.1, the capital budget for 2021.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. The proposed 2021 capital budget was presented to council for the first time on September 14th. At subsequent council meetings, the capital budget was brought back for council input. And after council inputs throughout several meetings and at budget deliberations, there was an opportunity for council to discuss and deliberate on the projects that administration has presented. The proposed 2021 capital budget that is being presented tonight reflect the changes that council has directed administration to make to date. The budget totals around 9.9 million and consists of 35 capital projects that will be funded from different sources, funding sources, such as capital grants, reserve funds, debentures, and other funding. The total operating impacts from the proposed capital projects amounts to approximately 188,000. Finally, subject to council not having any further direction, administration is recommending that council adopt the 2021 capital budget as presented. And with that, I'll be happy to address any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Manager Reyes. Anyone have any Councillor Ross?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. So a question in regards pertaining to the purchase of the new fire truck, the aerial truck that they'll have their preference in the future. When Public Works, when that truck was 600 and something thousand, why aren't we putting money in reserves each year of the lifetime of that truck? Like, we financed this truck over 20 years. Why isn't it treated the same as Public Works, where if we need a vac truck that was 600,000, we purchased it and it's paid for based upon the budget of that specific year? Do you understand what I'm trying to say?
To your question, why the reserve contributions for?
Well, I just, like you say, we purchased a vac truck that was 650,000. And a pumper truck is 650, or this aerial, yeah, obviously it's considerably higher, but why is Public Works different than fire? Why aren't we putting significant more in reserves to look at the lifetime of this equipment, that it's going to be done, that it's going to be, I don't know. I look at the process of that kind of in different departments. It kind of, like to finance a truck over 20 years in the first place was, I thought was kind of, that was the past, but it's just.
So, great question, honestly. I don't have a good answer. The real answer is we've inherited that system. Did not have a contribution coming out of it. And I guess I shouldn't, part of the reason, if I were stepping into the mindset of the prior CAO or finance manager, I would say, well, the county of Lacombe has a policy that they will not pay for internal transfers from one department to another. And the common services recovery would be considered an internal transfer. That's where you're typically putting that money away. What you're talking about putting away in advance for replacement with, say, the vac truck, that's how we do that. We take a contribution, in that case, out of Department 41 and 42, water and wastewater. Every year it goes into the capital reserve or the fleet reserve to pay for that when it comes time for replacement. With that option not being funded by Lacombe County, but them traditionally being willing to fund direct capital purchases through sort of cutting a check, for lack of a better term, it has just led to a system where, for simplicity, for reporting to the county and to fit sort of with their policy guidelines, it has been deemed advantageous to budget this way, lump sum ahead and then finance it at the time of purchase. I'm not sure if that's I shouldn't say that. It is the best way if there is no opportunity to make the case to the county that a reserve contribution is a legitimate operating expense. I think that a case can be made that way, that rational people, accountants on staff, so I think you can, but perhaps at the time it wasn't an accepted argument. I'm not quite sure.
Am I missing that in the new capital design or?
No,
Okay, so liquidated assets is finished over 20 years.
that's in the 10-year capital plan.
Thank you. Do we have any questions pertaining to the 2021 capital budget? Councillor Hoekstra?
No question. I will move that council adopt the 2021 capital budget as presented.
Thank you. Additional questions or concerns there?
I apologize, I was ahead.
Not a problem. So for these deliberations, more than most, I think that it's worth suggesting or noting to those watching at home that council spent a couple of long days deliberating these particular items. So I just don't want to make it seem like there is no interest in addressing these. They were dealt with, each and every one of them at great length, I would suggest. So this process, this is the approval, and this is why you may not be seeing a great deal of input. I think that's worth mentioning because I don't want anybody to construe that there's a lack of interest in how their finances are looked after here at the city. So if there is no additional input, we do have a motion for acceptance of the 2021 capital budget. And I will call the question. All those in favor? Seeing none opposed, that is unanimous. Thank you. And now we can go, now I can read my notes, Manager Reyes, to the 10-year capital plan.
Thank you, Mayor Christie. The 2021 to 2030 capital plan was presented to council on September 28, 2020. The plan outlines the capital requirements for the city of Lacombe over the next 10 years. And it's fully funded from different sources over that 10-year span. The 10-year capital plan exceeds the provincial and federal minimum requirements of having a 5-year capital plan. It is important to highlight that by council approving the 10-year capital plan, council is not providing authorization to spend funds in future years. Capital authorization only occurs through the budget process. Finally, administration is recommending that council approve the 2021 to 2030 capital plan as presented. With that, I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Councillor Ross?
Thank you, Mayor Christie. Sorry to further upon my previous out of order question. So with discussions taking place with the county, mathematically, is it any different whether you put it in reserves or you pay out debt? Does that complicate it, or does it make sense to change policy of how it was done in the past for shared equipment with the county, or because really you're either putting X amount of money into reserves or that same amount of money is servicing debt. So is it just is it making it more complicated, or does it make sense, or is it just it's just moving you know what I mean? It's just going from two different pots.
So the issue is that you'd be doubling up on the, like if it was one or the other and it was a theoretical purchase, I think that would be fine. But if you're still financing one and then you start putting money away for the replacement of that same one that you're, let's say, if I was to use a personal example, you go and buy a new truck. If you were making payments on that truck, but you say, wow, I really would like to buy this cash, I gotta save so that in 7 years when I'm done paying for this one, I can just buy another one. You got $1,000 a month truck payment, plus you gotta save $1,000 a month for that truck that you're gonna buy at the end. And so, while it might be preferable to have saved in advance, pragmatically, you got a raise at the time, you really don't have that extra money. And we think, we didn't get rooms like that. So I would say you kind of walked into the
Current
existing
system.
model, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, just
No, it's, well, that kind of question, actually.
Go ahead.
So with that, I will, once again, I reiterate, Grant Creasy to the public that we just don't make these motions lightly. There was a lot of previous planning by both council and administration. So, but I will make the motion the council approve the 2021 to 2030 capital plan as presented.
Thank you. Any additional comments, council? I will call the question and all those in favor? And none opposed? Thank you. I believe that concludes the request for decision portion of our agendas. We'll move into the information section and start off with our Chief Administrative Officer report.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. So obviously the initial information about the COVID status of the city is out of date, as we discussed at the beginning of this meeting. Although there is still no cases on staff at the time of the report and now, there's no cases on staff. Of course, there's 19 active cases in the community. I was able to meet with some other Central Albertan CAOs recently for issues facing Central Alberta, and I'm pleased, but without seeming arrogant, I guess, to champion the city of Macomb. I think we are, both our community and our residents, as well as the organization itself, we're in a really good spot compared to some of our colleagues, and so I'm just very pleased with the stability, the sound governance, the relatively unified approach to decision-making here in the city that's productive and respectful, and just highly appreciative of that as the CAO and senior staff. We are finalizing the Len Thompson Local Improvement Tax Plan with staff. This will be the first use of the recently adopted local improvement tax policy, so we're excited to look at how that's going to play out in the real world, and that'll come to council at the next meeting. We had a modified long service awards event. Thanks to Councillor Hibbs for appearing as deputy mayor. It was appreciated. We had the modified format, was actually quite well received by staff, some of whom were happy to not have as large of an audience when they received their award. And council's recent direction to replace the Christmas party with an alternate method of recognition has been well received by staff. Again, with some staff actually saying they prefer that. Regionally, we do continue to meet with Macomb County for ongoing fire services discussions. We have more planned this week. And I'm excited to hopefully have some announcements in the coming months there, or not announcements, recommendations for council in the coming months. And we are beginning to look at a process for shared consideration of joint service projects and community projects with Macomb County, which is a process that's been ad hoc in the past. Sometimes worked well, sometimes a little disjointed. So we're going to formalize that, which is one of the commitments of the ICF committee in the recent adoption of the ICF. That's all.
Thank you very much. Any questions, council? We have no council mailbox items for this meeting, so we'll move into committee reports. And the first one up is the Municipal Planning Commission minutes from September 9th. Does anyone have any questions on that report for either, I guess, Councilors Gullickson, Hibbs, or myself? If not, we will move into councillor reports. Mine will be verbal and short. I want to thank Deputy Mayor Hibbs for 2 items the other day when I was away from the city. I know that means a lot to the staff, especially at a long service event like that, which was altered somewhat, but thank you for being there and representing council. I appreciate it. Councillor Gullickson.
I have no report at this time.
Thank you. Councillor Ross.
Sorry, Mayor Creasy, I have no report at this time.
Councillor Hoekstra?
I don't have a written report, but I have a question. So I've been in talking to some citizens, and I just wondered, for the record, has the fire services review report been made public?
No, it's in draft form at this time.
It's in draft form, so when public knows about it, that is just a curious incident, or, yeah, anyhow. Because it's never been part of our packages, right? Like, I'm second guessing my own wisdom on this.
That's correct. So, sorry. So we are working on finalizing a review right now. I'm sorry, there has been one in camera, was it not? No, sorry, that was ahead of time. So we're just working on the final draft, and I think one thing that's important to note is that we are working to ensure that there's a framework for evaluating possible locations for the fire hall. We won't be specifically identifying possible locations that have been considered in the past. So any actual considerations of locations would continue to be in camera discussions as there land matters.
Councillor Jacobson? Councillor Hibbs? Very good. And we also have some information portion we do separate usually. Councillor Hoekstra?
I move that we accept the information as information.
Thank you. All those in favor? Thank you. On to number 7, adoption of minutes, October 26th, the regular council meeting minutes. Any items in there of concern the way they were recorded? If not, then did we have the organizational meeting from the same date? Anything there not recorded correctly? Motion then, please, Councillor Jacobson.
I move we adopt the council minutes as presented.
Appreciate that. And move down to next meetings there. Suppose we have one coming up November 23rd.
We need to vote on that item, please.
Okay. Just so council is aware, November 23rd, I'm not anticipating being here. For whatever that's worth, just so you know. And then Monday, December 7th, and Monday, January 11th. We've all got those in our calendars as information. And do we have a mover for acceptance of the minutes from before? Appreciate that. I will call the vote on that item now. All those in favor? Wonderful, thank you. Next motion. Councillor Jacobson.
I move to go on camera.
Thank you. Let the record reflect